The secret to living long is to have something to live for. And if you want to learn more about how to live a long and healthy life, you are at the right place. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tranquil, a place to gather, connect, and reflect. And Tranquil is brought to you by American Association for Precision Medicine and its Mental Health Task Force for your well-being. Hi, I'm Prasun Mishra. I'm founder and CEO of American Association for Precision Medicine, and I'm also a scientist, and my research work is primarily focused on preventing and curing chronic diseases, not only treating the sick, but also providing knowledge and tools to individuals to live longer and healthier life. And we are fortunate to have Dr. Luigi Fontana as our guest today. And Dr. Fontana is a director of a healthy longevity program at Charles Perkins Centre at the University of Sydney. And Dr. Fontana will share with us learnings from his book, The Paths to Longevity, The Secrets to Living a Long, Happy, and Healthy Life. Hello, Dr. Fontana. Welcome to Tranquil.
Hello, I'm well, thank you.
It is great to have you, Luigi. Thank you for joining us. And tell us more about your journey. Why did you levitate towards the field of longevity from a practicing physician?
It's a long story, but when I was a kid, I had an uncle who was a scholar of traditional Chinese, Indian medicine, philosophy, yoga. And so since I was a teenager, I was exposed to this kind of holistic philosophy, Taoism and, Buddhism and Hinduism. And I've always been fascinated by, the idea of this interrelation between the body and the mind. But then, I went through medical school, the classical medical school. I did a residency in internal medicine. I spent 1 year in London doing research, and then I started my PhD in metabolism. I did most of my PhD in US, working on calorie restriction. And again, because of this background of, a kind of holistic approach, I was more interested in to prevent diseases. So when I was a resident, I was spending my nights going to the emergency room and to treat people with myocardial infarction or diabetes or other issues, a stroke, other issues that we know are mostly preventable without healthy lifestyle. I said, no, I cannot spend the rest of my life prescribing the last antidepressant or the last anti-diabetic or statin or, anti-cancer or like a wheelchair or a incontinent device. I cannot do that. I cannot spend the rest of my life to put bandages to diseases that, we know are preventable. And so I said, I want to do science and understand, what are the pathways, the molecular metabolic pathways that are shaping, metabolic health and aging and the disease of aging. And so basically I started my journey at Washington University where I spent 17 years. And with John Hollodsy, we used exercise and diet, in particular calorie restriction, fasting, and changing quality, more plant-based, so high fiber, to change the gut microbiome, and protein modulation, and many other interventions, to see how in humans these interventions were impacting physiological, metabolic, and molecular pathways.
That's amazing, Luigi. This is, so you have just, amazing holistic background. So, have you given a thought? So I think you may be the right person to ask, what is the meaning of life in your, from your point of view? And is there a way to live an ideal life? How we can, how our metabolism and all that holistic being contributes to that?
Yeah. So, it's a very difficult question. It's a $1 billion question. I think that, to me, if I have to define an ideal life, I have probably two words. One is freedom, real freedom, mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual freedom. And the other one is happiness. Happiness not in the term of buying the new car, or buying the new beautiful house, but it's really happiness of having reached being able to enjoy your journey. I think life is a fantastic journey if we know how to live it. If you know how to walk your path, I think is fantastic. You go, you travel, around the world, you meet people, you make friends, you understand yourself by interacting with other people, with the challenges, of life, they're forcing to look inside yourself and to maximize your strength, because we are all different, and that's the beauty of life. We are all different, and each one of us has the potential to be, the real self, because someone is born a fish, someone a monkey, and so if you're born a monkey and you want to dive into the ocean, your life is going to be miserable. But if you're a fish and you want to climb a tree, your life also is going to become miserable. And so that's what I think the problem. A lot of people, they are wasting a lot of energy, a lot of time to achieve things that are unimportant. They think they are happy, but they are not happy, and that's why there is this pandemic of depression, anxiety, and many other mental diseases, unhappiness, because people, they don't know how to live their life, and they don't understand that it's not just a matter of practicing yoga or meditation, mindfulness, that are really important. But if you practice mindfulness and you are obese and you have metabolic alterations, these are impacting how your brain is working, your emotions. We know that leptin, adiponectin, and insulin, inflammation, BDNF, and other factors that are influenced by your metabolism have a central effect, and they are shaping your emotions, your creativity, your intuitive intelligence, and that's the problem. That we have, it's like there are silos, and so people, they are practicing yoga, but they are not really understanding the interaction between what they eat, what they do on the shaping of their brain and emotions, and so that's why I decided to write this book where I try to in some way to summarize my 40 years of journey as a scientist, as a clinician, and most importantly as a person who is trying to achieve those three goals. I would say one is freedom, one is happiness, and one I think is compassion, because without compassion for yourself first, and then for the other people, and for the environment, the protection of the environment, I think all the rest is unimportant.
That's amazing, Luigi. I think you mentioned the monkey and the fish analogy, right? That could be very well applied to the corporate world. I think the corporate world, we have different folks in different roles, right? And then I think so one of the challenges that I have faced is that, how to assign a particular role to a particular person. Any thoughts in your life, that you had this, experiences, the person was in a wrong role and then you figured out that, the right.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people, they are in the wrong role, because when we are born, depending on when, where, and from who we are born, we have a certain type of glasses, through which we look at life. But many of how we look life, it's biased. It's biased by a lot of what we see, what we hear, what we do, it's not real. It's something, it's tricky. There are a lot of illusions, and therefore, one of the tasks of life, I think, is that one, to live your life and try to get rid of, this particular glass. They are forcing you to look at life in a certain way and look at people in a certain way and try to become free. And so more merged, with the understanding of the beauty of the universe and of your interaction in this journey with the universe. And so merge with the universe. So that's a major task. But, there are instruments, there are ways to do it. My point in the book is that in many Oriental philosophies, the importance of the metabolic health in helping, in shaping this journey is underestimated. There is too much important on the mind, so the balance is unbalanced. Yeah, but I agree with you. A lot of people, they are leading lives that are not really in tune with what they are, but they are forced by a number of factors that make them unhappy.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought this point, Luigi, that the metabolic and what people eat can transform them into different types and of tasks they can do. Can you elaborate on that? That's a very interesting point, actually.
Look, in the last 20 years, we have been trying to dissect why we age. And so what we have understood, before we thought, aging was like, if I keep using this jacket, eventually it's gonna tear, it's gonna wear, And now we know that, aging is not a wear and tear process, but is highly regulated. There are certain metabolic and molecular pathways that are important in modulating the accumulation of metabolic molecular damage. So as we age, there is an accumulation that eventually makes the system unreliable. And so, you are more prone to disease, and when you are under stress, it's like that with COVID-19. It's clear that, probably if you are obese or hypertensive or you have cardiovascular disease, your risk of contracting COVID is the same, but your risk of ending up in ICU and dying is much higher if you are overweight, if you have type 2 diabetes, if you have hypertension, cardiovascular disease. So basically, what I'm saying is that even now with this virus, if you're healthier and you have, less metabolic abnormalities, your chance to survive and do well when you encounter this virus, if you have, if you're going to encounter, because probably most of us, they're going to encounter in the next 2-3 years the virus. So there is a lot people can do metabolically to improve their metabolic health, so that, when the virus hits their body and binds to the ACE2 receptor and then it activates, what we are finding, a lot of these people, they're not dying of respiratory disease, they're dying of vascular disease, endothelial dysfunction with a high risk of thrombosis. And so, what we are starting to understand that probably what is really killing people is basically this overreactive endothelium that is due to all these abnormal high glucose, high blood pressure, all these hormones that are regulating the thrombotic vascular response. And then there is the emotional part. A lot of people, they are stressed, by these, by these new condition of life. And again, there are two different ways to look at stuff. If you are balanced, if you have more mindful, if you have work on yourself and you are able to cope with stress, psychological stress, emotional stress, you're more able to find your way and maybe, get something out of it. For example, the fact, people are living at home with their family is good. You can talk with your husband, your wife, your kids. You can build stronger relationship. You have time, to enjoy your food. To enjoy, reading something together, to play some music, to read a book. So even in this bad time, there are positive aspects if we know how to get these positive aspects. So, but going back to your answer, to your question. as I said, we have discovered there are certain metabolic molecular pathways that are really key to control the accumulation of molecular damage. Mm-hmm. One of the most important is the insulin IGF-1 mTOR pathway. Mm-hmm. We have shown in multiple model organisms that when you downregulate the insulin IGF-1 mTOR pathway, you are basically slowing down the accumulation of damage, and animals are living longer and healthier. So many of the animals, they are like 90 years old and chronological age, but biologically they're like 50 years old, 40 years old. And now, we have lots of data from yeast, worm, flies, mice, now even monkeys, and my studies have been on humans. And now what we have shown, is that many of the metabolic molecular adaptations typically of animals that are living longer on calorie restriction are also occurring in humans. And so we know, we can powerfully modulate these metabolic molecular pathways in humans with a number of interventions. Mm-hmm. It's not only one, it's not only calorie restriction. So that's the beauty. There are a number of interventions that are impacting several important aging pathways.
Amazing. That's I think you brought elegantly the COVID-19 scenario right now. So I think, ironically, there is a dance of that is going in the midst of COVID-19, pandemic, and we are gathered here to discuss how to live a long and healthier life. So, so one question is that everybody will have is, can this be achieved in a short term? Because it's right now happening, or it's a long-term goal, actually. So I think so the behavioral changes, everybody says that, or yeah, right, but it will take me forever, right? So how to kind of
no, that's not true. That's not true. We have lots of data. You can quickly modulate these metabolic molecular pathways. You can improve insulin sensitivity, for example, so very quickly by exercise and diet. You can shut down, some of these pathways very quickly. Some takes longer, but some it takes, few days, few weeks. So, it's not years, and some of these pathways, some of these genes, it can be shut down very quickly. I mean, you have just to start to do what you are supposed to do. And in the book, of course, now in 10 minutes it's difficult, to summarize 400 pages of, 400 pages of science. And even in this book, of course, is a because it's for lay people, even if there are 600 citations. So because I want in each sentence should have at least one or more references, because I want that, people, they say, okay, he said that, let me see where it's coming from. Then, of course, it's my interpretation, but at least, you have a reference, and, you can check, my statement is based on what or which studies. Mm-hmm. And no, the good news is that, of course, the sooner you start, the younger you are, and the better. But the good news is that, even you're 50, 60, 70, some of the people, we have been studying at Washington University, they were in their 50s, 60s, and they had fantastic results. And there are studies, like the UK direct study, a randomized clinical trial showing, you take people with type 2 diabetes. After 1 year of a lifestyle intervention, the people who lost more than 10 kilos, diabetes gone. No more medication, cured. There is another study in Cuba where they took people with fatty liver disease, 10% weight loss, fatty liver gone. And in some people, in 60% of the people, fibrosis was declining, So the effects are powerful. So I recommend to everybody, because I think, this COVID is going to stay here with us. It's not going to go away like that. That, they should start to improve their metabolic and emotional and psychological health. So, they're going to be stronger when they're going to encounter the virus, and they're going to have a much higher chance of, going through the disease without major issues and recover very quickly.
Well, thank you for sharing that profound knowledge, Luigi. And I think your experience, the scientific experience, the experiments that you have done in the lab actually validates, and you and others, right? And this is a fact now, backed by science. So the question, that the follow-up question, that is that why do we age? Actually, everybody, so what are the mechanisms of aging? Why some folks age very fast, but then where others age slow?
Complexity of factors. Of course, genes play a role, but we know from identical twin studies that no more than 20-25% is due to genes. 75 to 80% is due to environmental factors, and we are trying to dissect which environmental factors are responsible for the accumulation of damage. So as we get older, basically there are an accumulation of damage, and so our repair maintenance system within our cells become less efficient. So we accumulate more DNA damage, we accumulate more protein toxicity. So our proteostasis become less efficient. There is issues with mitochondrial function, and autophagy it doesn't work well. So basically we accumulate misfolded proteins and dysfunctional organelles within our cells. And so all these factors are causing the system to become less efficient. And so when you are, even if you don't have chronic disease, as you get older, your capacity of cope with stress, for example, as you get older, even if you're an athlete, your VO2 max, your fitness declines. It declines approximately 1% per year. So your maximal heart rate, declines 1% per year on average. Your capacity of your heart to pump blood, and many other factors, they are degenerating. And that's why, even if you are a master athlete, a 20 years old person, you cannot compete with a 20 years old person because he has more VO2 max, he has higher max heart rate and many other factors. So that's what is aging, is an accumulation of damage due to a progressive decline in this maintenance repair system within our cells. The good news that we discovered is that some of these pathways can be manipulated by a number of lifestyle interventions. There are people now in my field working on CR mimetics. And so, you have, the resveratrol that doesn't work. We have now they are finding for the rapalogs, the senolytic drugs, we'll see. I think, we have much more powerful interventions already with lifestyle, that, are more safe than these CR mimetics. But, science will tell, time will tell. And so that's how we can slow down. We know, when for example, with fasting or calorie restriction or exercise, by downregulating this insulin IGF-1 pathway, you increase autophagy, you increase DNA repair genes, you increase antioxidant genes like SOT2 and catalases. You inhibit cell proliferation through cyclin D inhibition. And if you reduce cell proliferation, you're reducing the random mutations. And if random mutation hits oncogenes, you have cancer. If random mutation hits non-oncogenes, you have cell senescence. And when you have cell senescence, you have the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, metalloproteinases, and other growth factors that are driving aging and cancer. So we have a pretty well, we have a clear picture of how basically aging works through, some of this pathway I was just mentioning, and how exercise can lower insulin, improve insulin sensitivity, different dietary tricks, so calorie restriction, fasting, the gut microbiota with the fibers, and can manipulate immune health. We know that protein intake is very important. We think there is an overconsumption of protein that is driving aging through the mTOR pathway. So especially branched-chain amino acids and sulfur amino acids that are very rich in animal products are driving the aging and cancer process through several pathways. The most important is the mTOR pathway. And so, we have a clear understanding. So again, it's difficult to summarize, such a huge field, in 10, 15, 20 minutes talk. So for people who are expert, there are a number of reviews, we wrote in Nature, Science, and Cell, and other important journals. And for people who are not expert, again, I wrote, this book. I don't know if you can see now, probably not. This book is called The Path to Longevity, where, I summarize for lay people, some of this knowledge. But there is an extra step, because, when we talk about longevity, as we said before, in which context? Live longer for what? So what's the meaning of life? Just to live longer? Some of the people I've been studying who are doing calorie restriction, they're obsessed with living longer, but their quality of life, their freedom, I don't think is there, because they are obsessed, by body weight, by food, and but the question is, what is the meaning of life, and what should you do to be free, happy, creative, and to be an empathic person, and most importantly, to protect the environment? Because, a lot of people, they don't realize, that's the third part of my book, that, what we do every single day has a huge consequence on our environmental health. So let's say, that, I'm wrong, and that, the paleo people, the high protein people, that is very fancy right now, they're right. We have data that that's not true, that, these high protein diet are bad for your health, but, let's say, I'm wrong, But if 7 billion people, they start to eat, animal products as people in US and Australia and Europe do, what is going to happen of the environment? How many, so how many, forests we have to destroy to grow enough crops for feeding billions of animals? How much devastation in terms of global warming? 30% of global warming is due to intensive animal farming and intensive agriculture. In California, there is a shortage of water, because we pump so much water from the aquifers, to give water to all these animals and to the crops. There is a lot of pollution due to pesticides and all these phosphorus and nitrogen, the fertilizer, they are causing huge problems. There is antibiotic resistance due to intensive animal farming. Some of these epidemics, like the COVID and other avian flu, they're coming out of this intensive animal farming, and we see the consequences, financial consequences. There are trillions of dollars spent. There is a huge problem, now with unemployment, and then there is global warming. As I said, it is a major problem, because, if the temperature goes up for 1 or 2 degrees, the consequences, they're going to be much worse than, this COVID crisis. So my message in the book is that, I think, we have to look, we have to, with this COVID and, other things happened in the last few years, like the bushfires, I think, it's time for us to stop, to start to meditate, to reflect, and try to understand, if there is a better way to live our lives. I believe there is. I believe, we have the knowledge to live in a fantastic world. In US, $3.3 trillion of health money spent every year on healthcare. 90% of these 3.3 trillion are to treat disease that are mostly preventable with healthy lifestyle. So it's a huge waste of resources. We have the technology and knowledge, to build energy efficient cars, energy efficient homes, and, to really change the economy in a way that, is pro-health, pro-environment. And we are doing the opposite.
No, thank you, Luigi. I think so. In the COVID crisis, what would be your? So there is an exercise. You mentioned meditation. You mentioned improving immune health, right? So what should the question will be? Okay, so what is my short-term prescription from Dr. Fontana? Prescription to change the metabolic profile and boost their immunity, actually.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question. It's like, this is a $1 billion question. It depends from where you start, from what is your metabolic health, what are your conditions, what medication you are taking, and many factors. And then, it's like, if you ask, if I have a 11 years old boy, it's like if he asks me, Dad, how can I become a doctor? How can I become a scientist? What is going to be the answer? You have to slowly learn, to master certain topic subjects.
So it is a gradual process. So then, so I think so 30 minutes, every day exercise and once a meditation and eating, a very healthy diet. I think this is a good start, actually.
It's a very good start, but again, if you know the mechanisms, if you understand the mechanisms, then you measure, you measure some of the outcomes. You can measure something, in your body that is going to tell you if you're on the right track. Otherwise, there are these rules, half an hour a day and of exercise, and you have to do half an hour every other day of mindfulness. You have to eat this and that, but it depends, so I think, as everything, first, let's understand the mechanisms. What are the metabolic molecular pathways? You can measure with your doctor, your insulin, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your waist circumference, and many other stuff, that I tell in the body. So in the book, so basically you have some factors that you can measure to check your progress. And then, depending on who you are, what is your health, you can start, to work on several aspects by working on these pathways in a more precise medicine. That's what you do, basically, in a precise way, you can act on these pathways if you know what is doing what.
Wonderful. No, and I think that's a good point that you bring to. So that so in America, at American Association of Precision Medicine, we talk about how we can move medicine from reactive to proactive care. And I think you touched upon this concept in your Nature editorial in 2014. Can you share some ideas, and how you envision that, and how can we make that transition where physicians are now incentivized for keeping a patient healthy?
Yeah, so in this editorial on Nature, what we were describing is that, right now all over the world, we are living this sick care system. We call healthcare, but it's not healthcare, it's sick care. So basically, as physicians, we are trained, to make diagnosis of diseases that normally take 40, 50 years to develop. You develop a myocardial infarction and a cancer because for 1 year you're not exercising or you are eating badly. It takes many, many years of high cholesterol, high blood pressure, inflammation, and many other metabolic hormonal alteration that I describe in my book, to get cancer, to get dementia, to get cardiovascular disease. Again, as physicians, we are trained to make diagnosis. So typically a patient comes to me and say, look, I have a chest pain, or I have blood in my feces, or I have, a nodule in my breast. And then what we do, we make, we do tests, imaging or laboratory tests, and they say, okay, you have cancer, you have this, you have that. And then typically, we are trained to treat this disease with surgery and drugs. In some ways, like, if you don't change your tire, and you drive your car, with flat tires, that, sooner or later it's going to happen. Maybe it's raining and you're going to lose control and you're going to hit, and depending how bad luck, if you are where you are and how bad is the traffic, you're going to die or you're going to damage your car more or less badly. And then, you bring your car to the mechanic and say, how bad is the damage and what we can do to fix it. So that's how the medicine works. So we think that, based on this understanding of the biology of aging, if you act before, if you change your tire, your risk of having an accident is much, much lower. Is zero? No, it's not zero, but it's much, much lower. And therefore, by acting upstream, by working on these metabolic molecular patterns of aging, you are preventing multiple disease altogether, because you are working upstream of the basic mechanisms that are driving the accumulation of damage, leading to multiple disease, not to one disease. So again, with precision medicine, we have to work to understand how we can fine-tune in every single person, because we are all different. How can we use the best intervention to block the accumulation of damage, or at least to slow down the molecular damage accumulation, so that we can prevent multiple disease. We can save huge amount of money. If you think about obesity, in US now 70% of people are overweight or obese, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease. The World Health Organization claims that at least 80% of cardiovascular type 2 diabetes are preventable. Based on my data, it's 95%. Cancer, World Health Organization, 40% is preventable. Based on our data on calorie restriction, probably 70–80% of cancer, common cancer, are preventable. These are huge amount of money that could be redirect on green economy, developing a healthier society where people, they have more time, to enjoy their life, doing creative, artistic, stay with their families, instead of we are working like crazy. We are like mad people, stressed people that, they are working for what? To get sick? And then to get treated and get antidepressant, and anxiolytic drugs, and the last chemo, or ending up with a bypass, with a new stent, So there is a better way, to approach medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's not based on this new age, because the problem, a lot of alternative medicine looks like, this is new age nutrition, No, we have shown, that, nutrition, if you approach it in the right way, in the molecular metabolic way, is much more powerful than any medication that is on the market. We just published a paper in Lancet in the Endocrinology Metabolism, where we showed, with a mild 13% calorie restriction, we were able to reduce LDL cholesterol, increase HDL cholesterol, improving insulin sensitivity, reducing systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, oxidative stress measured by F2 isoprotein, C-reactive protein, TNF-alpha. With one intervention, tell me which drug is able to do all these metabolic improvements in a simple 13% reduction in caloric intake with an improvement in nutrition. There is no drug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's that's a very good point. So I had a couple of follow-up questions, and I'll open the floors if anybody else has a question. So you mentioned two things. One was intermittent fasting. So the question is how intermittent fasting can be done right. So that's one question. The second question was a body, and you mentioned the analogy between body and a car. So also, if you drive your car too much, your car ages fast. So the question is, the turtle is basically turtle moves very slow, so you can see the turtle is kind of an animal for aging, right? It's a model animal. So how in your case we exercise, is there an overdoing, or or how do we balance that to so yeah, two different questions: how intermittent fasting done right, and how what is the balance actually when we exercise and and overuse the body?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We don't know really, but you are touching an important point. So calorie restriction is what I call a low energy flux status. So the amount of calories that are going through the insulin, IGF-1, mTOR Krebs cycle is much lower. Instead of exercise is what is a high flux energy status. You are consuming a lot of calories, that you are burning these calories. So, John Holliday, who was my mentor, and I worked with him for 17 years. He's one of the pioneers of exercise physiology. Many years ago, he was convinced that exercise was a pro-longevity anti-aging intervention. So he designed a study where he took rats and he randomized them to ad libitum fed, sedentary, exercising ad libitum fed, and then he said, I want to have another control. And he said, so I want to have a weight matched group that has the same body weight than the exercising animals. And so he had to reduce calories by 30%. What he found, calorie restriction was extending both average and maximal lifespan, but exercise was increasing only average lifespan, suggesting that, exercise is important for improving metabolic health, but is not slowing aging. So going back to your question, ideally, probably nutrition is more important than exercise, but that's not true because exercise has a lot of beneficial effects. For example, if you want to improve insulin sensitivity, we have shown in several studies in humans, exercise is more powerful than calorie restriction in lowering insulin. Exercise does not lower T3, so it doesn't lower your resting metabolic rate. And there are many other factors, exercise increasing GLUT4, so it is improving glucose tolerance through an acute phase of the GLUT4 transporter. So there are many factors where exercise is complementary. What is wrong is this idea that, okay, I'm lean because I'm running 50 miles a week. So every morning I wake up and I go for an hour run, and then during the weekend I do like 5-6 hours. And then I eat whatever I want. I go to McDonald's, I eat whatever I want. No, that's wrong. The idea, that, you are lean because, you are exercising and then you eat a lot of high protein, low fiber, highly refined processed food, and you're going to be healthier and live longer. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's an interaction of factors. And that's why, again, when you ask me, give me a few rules, half an hour a day of exercise, whatever. No, because you have to understand which pathways you are impacting and how you are impacting these pathways based on your genetic background. And therefore you can design, probably with a doctor who knows what to do, which is the best combination of interventions. So for example, for calorie restriction, there are several ways where, you can limit your calories. And most importantly, you can limit the increase in waist circumference because, what we know is that, the accumulation of visceral fat, when your waist circumference, when you can pinch fat in your abdomen, means that, you have an excessive caloric intake and you are depositing these extra calories into visceral fat. And we have shown, and other people have shown, this visceral fat is producing pro-inflammatory cytokines, is through hormones that are called adipokines that are influencing your risk of developing diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and many other diseases. So, exercise, as I said, is one weapon that you have, but the other one is to reduce calorie. Like how you reduce calories, simple tricks. One is to eat a high vegetable fiber diet. So we have to remove ultra processed food, high animal food, in small amount, mostly fish, and eat more real food. Lots of different types of vegetables, whole grains, beans, seeds, nuts, so rich in fiber, phytochemicals, vitamins. We have done a study we've just finished a study where, we fed people for 2 months a Mediterranean diet, high in fiber, and people, they were losing weight even if it was isocaloric. I had to overfeed people 250 calories a day on average to keep their body weight from declining. Okay. The other trick is to stop eating before you're full. A lot of people, especially in US, you have this huge plate. You go and you order, you have this big portion, and then people, they want to clean everything because they feel guilty to leave something in their food. Instead of, a good rule is to stop eating when you are 80% full. When you say, okay, I'm okay, I will eat something more, but I stop. It's called haribuchi mi, is a Confucian saying. Stop when you are 80% full. In this way, you are doing 20% calorie restriction. Another way is to do some fasting. Let's say tomorrow you go out for a dinner, and it's correct. You want to enjoy, you drink an extra glass of wine, you eat a bit more. The day after, you can do fasting. We did a study in US where, people were eating twice a week a vegetable fasting. So they could eat as many non-starchy vegetables, raw and cooked ad libitum, with 2 tablespoons of olive oil per day, lemon or vinegar, and they lost on average 8% weight loss. Some people, they lost 30 kilos in 6 months just by doing this vegetable fasting twice a week. You don't have to count, the beauty, you don't have to count calories. It's just, vegetables, raw or cooked, non-starchy, with 2 tablespoons of olive oil. This is 500 calories per day. On a weekly basis, this is 20% calorie restriction. And then there is time-restricted feeding, eating slowly. There are many other small tricks that I'm telling in the book, you can use, to twist your metabolism and reduce your calories without becoming obsessed by counting calories.
No, amazing. No, that's thank you for sharing, Luigi. And finally, we got that out of you. the prescription to live a healthy life. Yeah, I think, and so I think I'll ask the last question is that, I think you, and that the question screams out of, so I think I'll ask it. So the question is there a way to live a low metabolic life? So the two ways to live, right? A high metabolic state or low metabolic state. So which one? So you mentioned exercise, right? It's basically it makes you more hungry, so you eat more, but it goes into high metabolic state. And the second is a low metabolic state, where you are intermittent fasting and you are running in a low, kind of a turtle or the fishes who live long, right? That's what the state they are. So for humans, what would be, or a balance is needed actually. So what are your thoughts on this?
It's a balance. It's a balance because, if you are, let's say, by doing calorie restriction, you're going to live 10 years longer, okay? But you are going to be weak. You have very low muscle mass, and, as you get older, you become frail. Not frail, but, you are becoming less able to travel, then I think, the price you are paying is too big. And so I think it's a combination, because, when I'm 80, 90, I would like to, to say tomorrow, I want to go and do a trip at the foot of Himalaya. So if I'm too weak, because I've been not doing exercise because I want to save energy because of calorie restriction, then I don't have the strength, to enjoy my life. If I want to do a bike tour, I want to climb, stairs, if I want to carry something that is heavy, because I'm backpacking. So again, it's a balance. So there are three pillars in longevity. One is the diet, one is the exercise, and there are different type of exercise. There is endurance, resistance. We didn't talk, I talk in my book about, the flexibility, the posture. A lot of people don't understand, how important is the posture, for example, to avoid back pain, neck pain, and many other joints problems, as you get older. And then, also for your well-being, if you have a good posture, you look better. You also, when you interact with other people, if someone is all twisted, it's bent, it's the whole physiology doesn't work well, when you are. So there is three aspects of exercise. There is endurance, resistance, and flexibility, posture, yoga and other stuff. And then finally, there is the mind. What we know is that, training the mind has several aspects. One is that, as you get older, you should always learn new things, painting, reading learning a new language, or playing an instrument, because this is forcing your synapses, to work. And so there are studies showing, you have less decline in cognitive abilities if you keep training your brain. The other one is the mindfulness, the emotional, how you regulate the emotions, and you learn to live in the present. You learn, to understand, how your body is working. In some way, hatha yoga practice in the right nice instrument, to understand, how your body is working, if there are tensions, if there are problems, and to be mindful of your breathing and respiration. And by the way, some of these techniques, there are paper published in Circulation, in Hypertension, in many important journals. So for example, if you go from a 12, 16 breaths per minute that is what typically we do, to like 4 or 5 by deep respiration, the abdominal, diaphragmatic respiration, you are inhibiting inflammation through the vagus, to the parasympathetic nervous system, through acetylcholine, which is binding to the macrophages receptors. You are, by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, you are basically reducing blood pressure, heart rate, and you are doing a lot of physiological important stuff. So again, you see how the interaction of exercise and cognitive training and mindfulness, breathing techniques, they are working on these pathways that, we know, the sympathetic, parasympathetic, the insulin angiotensin pathway, the angiotensin 2, the AC5. There are so many pathways that can be targeted by specific intervention, where there are beautiful papers published, showing how you target specific pathways.
Amazing. No, thank you for sharing that, Luigi. I think it has been a blessing. Any questions for Luigi? There was one story that told to me that in a school children, it was asked, how, you will live a long, who would like to live a long life? And then children some raised their hands, and then the teacher asked them, so why would you like to live that long life? And they said, because we have seen our elders, living a longer, healthy life. And then the others who did not raise a hand, and they asked, why do you do not want to live a long and healthy life? And they said, because we have seen elders, living, being very miserable. And so this was so there are two different perspectives whenever we talk about aging. So I think you touched a little bit upon, but I think it will be a very good closing thought to how do we scientifically explain this, and how to kind of bridge the gap between the two populations and their experiences.
So it's a very important question, but very difficult one. I think, that I fully agree with you. There is no point to live a long life if you spend the last 30, 40 years of life, depressed, demented, or maybe with a stroke, and you are spending, in a very sad, nursing home, with pain, and, I think there is no point, to do that. But that's unfortunately what happens. That's what, what we have been achieved with medicine right now is exactly this one. Basically, to keep people alive with multiple conditions, with multiple medication for many, many years. And there are two issues with that. One is that, it's painful. The second one, that is unsustainable. So, for example, in Australia, there is a prediction that, the cost of healthcare is going to double in terms of GDP in the next 15, 20 years, and it's unsustainable on the finances of the state, and in Europe is even worse. And in US, I know, because I was talking with, for example, the previous CEO of Mayo Clinic. They know the system is bust. That is impossible to pay for this epidemic of obesity and metabolic alteration associated, with obesity. And the solution, unfortunately, is not going to be new drugs. And so my point is that, if you understand, by tweaking, these metabolic pathways, molecular pathway, you can extend health span and lifespan, because I don't want to become 80 and be demented. No, my goal is, to improve my health, so, when I'm 50 is like when I'm 20, when I'm 80 is like when I'm 50, when I'm 100 is like when I'm 60. And so, I can still enjoy my life. I can enjoy my kids, my grandkids, and, enjoy my friends, have a lot of interesting experience, try to understand myself and become a better human beings, contributing to the health of the society, of the planet. So that's my point. And again, we have the knowledge, but unfortunately we are doing the opposite. The society, all the science and medicine and the economy is going unfortunately in the wrong direction. And COVID, bushfires, flooding, and all these issues are telling us, global warming, that we are in the wrong direction, and the consequences, they are going to be huge. And again, as I said, this financial crisis due to COVID is just small, you know, the beginning of something, you know, if we don't change our way of living our lives, is gonna come in the next few years, unfortunately.
Thank you, Luigi. And this was, it has been amazing and a pleasure listening to you. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share this. And thank you all for joining, and you all have an amazing day or evening or a night ahead from, depending upon from where you are joining. Thank you all.